You ever notice how people don't really see you until you're not there anymore? When you move different, when you step back, when you disappear, that's when the truth starts to surface. Because presence can be taken for granted, but absence is loud. It speaks louder than any words you could have said. It makes people uncomfortable. It makes them feel things they never admitted when you were standing right in front of them. See, disappearing ain't always about running away. Sometimes it's about finding yourself. Sometimes it's about protecting your peace, guarding your energy, building in silence. And when you do that, the world around you reacts. They feel it. They feel the gap you leave, the space you once filled, the weight of your presence that they didn't know was holding everything together. When you disappear, 10 different emotions wake up in the people around you. Shock, reflection, regret, respect, inspiration, legacy, just to name a few. Each one tells a story about how much you mattered, even if they never said it when you were near. That's the power of disappearing. It forces people to confront the truth they tried to ignore. When you disappear, the first thing that hits the room is silence. It's not always the type you can hear, but it's the kind that's felt. People get so used to your presence, your rhythm, the way you call, the way you move, even the small things you drop in conversations, that when it's suddenly gone, the absence feels louder than your presence ever did. It's the kind of silence that makes them replay old moments in their head. They scroll back through the text messages, they hear your voice in old conversations, they notice that the chair you used to fill looks heavier now that it's empty. It's shock, because they never thought they'd have to live a day without you being right there in reach. People underestimate consistency. They think showing up is simple until the person who always shows up suddenly isn't there anymore. That's when the silence gets heavy. The shock isn't just about losing someone, it's about realizing how much of their routine was built around you. Maybe you were the one they vented to. Maybe you were the person who lit the energy in a room. Maybe you were the balance that kept things from falling apart. When you vanish, they don't just lose a person, they lose a pattern. And the brain don't handle broken patterns well. That's why it feels like static in their chest. They don't know what to do with the space you leave behind, and it leaves them restless. Some people feel that shock in small ways. They call your phone and it rings different. They check your social media and it's quiet. They pass by places where you used to stand and it feels empty. They don't know how to process it, so they start reaching for explanations. Did I do something wrong? Why did they leave? When are they coming back? The silence breeds questions, and questions breed unease. They never thought about how much weight your presence carried until they had to lift it without you. What's wild is how shock exposes dependency. Some people leaned on you for energy they couldn't create themselves. When you step away, they get forced to face their own voids. It's like pulling a plug from the wall and realizing how much depended on that outlet. Shock makes them confront what they never built for themselves. They might be mad about it, but the truth is, the silence you leave is the mirror they didn't want to look into. For others, shock hits deeper because your disappearance isn't just silence, it's distance. It means no access. People panic when they lose access because access equals control. They could always call you, lean on you, pull from you. Now without that, they feel powerless. That power shift makes people uncomfortable. They want to know why you left, what you're doing, and if you'll come back, not just because they miss you, but because your presence gave them leverage in their own world. There's also a piece of shock that turns into respect. When you disappear, people realize you had the strength to break away, to move different, to prioritize yourself without announcing it. They might not admit it at first, but deep down they admire it. Not everybody has the courage to step back, especially when they know people rely on them. The silence you create is also a statement. It says, I'm not as replaceable as you thought. It says, you can't just count on me to always be available. It says, my value exists even louder when I'm not here. Shock and silence aren't just what they feel, it's also what makes them remember you longer. The absence becomes an echo that repeats in their head, reminding them of the energy you used to bring. The shock fades, but the imprint doesn't. Dilection always comes after the silence, because once the noise of shock calms down, people start sitting with themselves. When you disappear, they replay the past in their heads like a loop. They start going over the things you said, the moves you made, the times you pulled through for them, the times you might have been distant but still present. Reflection is like a mirror that pops up only when something is gone. While you were there, they didn't need to think about how valuable you were, because access was easy. When you step away, the brain gets busy searching through memories to find meaning. That's the mind trying to answer a question it doesn't want to admit. How did I treat them when they were here? Some people reflect with guilt. They realize you were always available, but they didn't reciprocate. They might remember moments when you called and they brushed you off, when you gave advice and they ignored it, when you showed love but they didn't match it. In reflection, those moments don't just reappear, they get magnified. Suddenly, the things they overlooked weigh heavier than the things they acknowledged. It's a mental payback and it stings because they can't undo the neglect. That reflection becomes a quiet teacher, reminding them not to take people for granted. Others reflect with gratitude, but it's delayed gratitude. They start thinking about the laughs you shared, the energy you brought, the way your presence shifted a room. They realize that you made life lighter in ways they didn't notice while you were standing there. That's the tricky thing about reflection. It's usually late. They don't give you your flowers when you're active, but when you step back, suddenly the garden in their memory is full of colors they never saw before. It's almost like the brain waits for loss to appreciate abundance. Reflection also works like a test. It makes them question themselves. Did they match your energy? Did they pour into you the way you poured into them? Were they really a friend, a partner, a supporter, or were they just taking what you gave? This is where people start seeing their own flaws. Your absence becomes a measuring stick against their actions. They can't escape it because the silence makes them sit still, and stillness brings thought. A lot of people avoid reflection in their day-to-day life by staying busy, but when someone disappears, the void slows everything down. In that space, self-accountability creeps in, even if they don't want it. Some reflections are fueled by curiosity. They wonder what you're doing, how you're moving, whether you disappeared to elevate or to heal. In their mind, they start building stories. They imagine you working on yourself, leveling up, grinding in private. And that thought alone makes them compare it to their own life. Reflection turns into self-judgment. What am I doing with my time? Have I grown the way they probably are right now? That internal dialogue can push them to start changing their own habits. Your absence acts like a spark that ignites their introspection. Reflection can also bring out hidden respect. People might not say it out loud, but when they think about your disappearance, they realize you had boundaries. You weren't afraid to put yourself first, and that kind of move makes them admire you in secret. They start reflecting on why they don't do the same. Why do they keep giving themselves away to people, jobs, or situations that drain them? Why do they struggle to step back when they know they should? Your decision becomes a silent example, a lesson without a lecture. At the same time, reflection exposes fear. They wonder if you'll ever come back, if the bond is broken for good, if the version of you they knew is gone forever. That thought makes them measure how much you really meant to them, because losing something permanently makes people reconsider its value. Reflection isn't always gentle. Sometimes it cuts, sometimes it burns, but it always reveals. It forces people to sit with the truth of how they treated you and how they lived alongside you. Regret is the shadow that follows reflection, because once people have sat with their memories and replayed their actions, the weight of what they didn't do starts pressing down. When you disappear, regret creeps in like a slow storm. They start thinking about the times they could have said something and didn't, the times they could have shown love but stayed cold, the moments where they chose their pride over presence. Regret doesn't just whisper, it digs. It makes them feel like they lost something that could have been saved if they'd moved different when they had the chance. What hurts most about regret is how it always comes late. While you were around, they had 1,000 chances to check on you, to respect your energy, to invest back into you, but they assumed tomorrow would come. People build habits of assuming access will always be there, and when you break that cycle, their mind punishes them. They replay scenarios like a movie they can't edit. They start wishing for do-overs. They wish they had picked up that call, replied to that text, shown up when they promised. Regret makes the smallest missed moments feel massive because they can't be undone. Some regrets are heavy because they're tied to silence. Maybe they didn't tell you how much you mattered. Maybe they never gave you the flowers while you were here. They kept their gratitude hidden, thinking they'd have time to express it later, but later never came. Now in your absence, their chest feels tight with unspoken words. That silence becomes a burden because it plays on their conscience. They know you never got to hear the things you deserve to hear, and that emptiness stings worse than anything else. For others, regret comes from neglect. They remember times when you gave and they didn't give back, when you carry weight for them but they never returned the effort. You might have been the one holding the line steady and they might have taken it for granted. In your absence, that imbalance is exposed. They realize they leaned too heavy on you And now the guilt of not meeting you halfway burns them up. That regret doesn't just make them miss you, it makes them question their own worth as a friend, a partner, a family member. There's also regret tied to ego. They think about arguments where they could have chosen peace, but chose pride instead. They think about how they let distance grow when all it would have taken was a simple call, a small gesture, a little humility. Regret is cruel because it points out how avoidable the pain could have been. All the stubbornness that felt powerful in the moment looks foolish in the absence. The ego that once seemed important now feels like the wall that blocked connection. Regret pushes people into late realizations. They finally see that your time was valuable, that your energy was rare, that your presence was never something to play with. But the painful part is they're realizing it when you're no longer within reach. Regret is the teacher that shows up after the test has already failed. They don't get to go back and change their answers. They only get to sit with the lessons carved into their chest. That's what makes it one of the heaviest feelings when someone disappears. In some cases, regret even turns into obsession. They replay your last interactions, your last words, your last moves over and over again, searching for clues. They wonder if you noticed their lack of effort, if you left because of them, if your disappearance is permanent. That obsession doesn't heal quickly. It lingers because the mind keeps pulling them back to the things they didn't do, the chances they didn't take, the love they didn't show. Regret is proof of impact. People don't regret losing what had no meaning to them. They regret losing the people who shifted their world. Even if they didn't admit it while you were there, your absence creates that clarity, and regret makes sure they never forget it. Respect is one of those feelings that doesn't always show up in the moment, but grows stronger the longer you're gone. When you disappear, people start recognizing the weight of your choices. At first, some may feel offended or confused, but as time passes, they begin to understand that stepping back took strength. Respect is born from realizing that you valued yourself enough to distance when things weren't serving you. It's not easy to create space because most people cling to comfort, cling to habits, cling to people even when it drains them. But when you decide to vanish from that cycle, it demands attention. People may not say it out loud, but deep down they admire that kind of discipline. Your disappearance forces people to acknowledge the boundaries you set. They may not have thought you had them, especially if you were always available, always the one to show up. But when you step back, you show them that your presence was not guaranteed. It wasn't owed, it was something you chose to give, and now you chose to take back. Respect grows from that realization because it flips the narrative. Instead of being the one who needed them, you reminded them that they needed you just as much, maybe more. That shift plants a seed of respect because people respect those who know their worth enough to protect it. But there's also a respect that comes from the mystery. When you disappear, people start wondering what you're doing with your time. They imagine you focusing on your growth, on your craft, on your vision. Even if they don't know the details, the fact that you're disciplined enough to step into solitude makes them admire you in silence. They respect the idea that while they're stuck in the same routines, you might be out there creating a better version of yourself. Your distance paints you as someone who refuses to be ordinary, someone willing to sacrifice comfort for elevation. That picture earns respect even if it's never spoken. Respect is also tied to scarcity. When people don't see you every day, your value increases. They start to weigh your words more, your time more, your energy more. Being constantly available sometimes blinds people to your worth. But the moment they can't access you, they're forced to see how rare your presence was. Respect grows in that gap because scarcity sharpens appreciation. It makes them realize that not everybody moves the way you do. Not everybody carries themselves with that kind of conviction. The less they see you, the more they recognize your uniqueness. Some people respect the courage behind your disappearance. To pull away often means breaking ties, leaving comfort zones, facing loneliness, or walking away from people who thought they had permanent access to you. Not everybody can do that. Many stay stuck in situations out of fear. But when you disappear, it signals bravery. It shows that you had the heart to stand alone rather than stay somewhere you didn't belong. That type of courage earns respect because it speaks to character. It says, you're not just existing, you're choosing your path with intention. There's another layer of respect that comes with time. As weeks or months pass, people see the changes in themselves that came from your absence. They realize how much they leaned on you, how much your presence shaped their direction, and how much harder life feels without your steadying influence. Even if they were frustrated at first, that long-term reflection breeds respect because they can't deny the difference you made. It's hard to ignore the value of someone who left a lasting mark, and respect often grows stronger the longer they sit with it. Respect isn't always loud. It's not always claps, compliments, or public praise. Sometimes it's in the way people mention your name differently after you're gone. Sometimes it's in the way they hold themselves a little straighter when they think of you. Sometimes it's in the way they talk about your choices when you're not there, using your actions as examples of strength. Your absence becomes a lesson in self-respect, and that lesson spreads to others whether you meant for it to or not. That's how respect works. It multiplies quietly and it lingers even when you're not in the room. Inspiration is one of the most powerful things people feel when you disappear, because your absence has a way of shifting their perspective. At first they might be confused, maybe even hurt, but once that fades, the thought starts to creep in. What are you doing while they can't see you? They picture you grinding in silence, building in secret, shaping a new version of yourself away from their eyes. That imagination alone sparks something in them. They start comparing their daily habits to what they believe you're doing, and in that comparison, they start feeling the urge to move different. Your distance becomes a silent motivator. When you're constantly present, people can get comfortable. They see you, they talk to you, they know where you stand, and that familiarity makes them underestimate your drive. But when you step back, you create space for them to guess, to wonder. That mystery inspires them because it represents possibility. It makes them think maybe you're working on goals they never had the courage to chase. Maybe you're transforming yourself in ways they've been too afraid to attempt. Even without showing proof, the simple act of pulling away lights a fire in them because it forces them to confront their own stagnation. Inspiration also comes from the discipline they see in your move. Most people cling to people and places even when they know it's not helping them grow. They stay tied to circles that drain them because they don't want to feel alone. But when you disappear, it shows you value yourself more than you fear solitude. That kind of strength speaks loudly, even without words. It inspires others to question what they've been tolerating. They start asking themselves if they should walk away from their own distractions, if they should start building in silence too. Your decision creates a blueprint for them to follow, even if they never admit they're watching. Some people will find inspiration in the growth they assume is happening during your absence. They imagine you reading, learning, hustling, sharpening your skills. They imagine you becoming more focused, more aligned, more unstoppable. That image alone pushes them to want more for themselves. It makes them restless with the idea of staying the same while you're out there changing. Your absence becomes a challenge, almost like a silent competition, daring them to rise up and evolve. Don't want to be left behind by the version of you they haven't even met yet. There's another side of inspiration that comes from respect. The more they respect your boundaries, the more inspired they are to set their own. The more they respect your courage to walk away, the more they want to be courageous themselves. Inspiration spreads through example, and disappearing is an example that speaks louder than constant explanation. You don't have to tell anyone to take care of themselves or focus on their dreams. By showing that you're willing to step back and put yourself first, you give them silent permission to do the same. Even those who once doubted you feel it. Maybe they didn't believe in your vision. Maybe they thought you were all talk. But when you step away from the noise, it forces them to reconsider. They begin to wonder if you were serious all along. That wonder can turn into their own spark because suddenly they realize you might come back with results that prove them wrong. That possibility inspires them to rethink what's possible for themselves, because if you can reinvent yourself in silence, maybe they can too. Inspiration doesn't always show up immediately. Sometimes it takes weeks, months, or even years before someone admits your absence pushed them. They might not give you credit, but deep down they know the move you made created a shift in them. They carry your example like a seed planted in their subconscious, and eventually it grows into action. They start cutting off distractions, investing in themselves, chasing dreams they once left behind. Your disappearance becomes part of their fuel. And even though you're not there to see it, the inspiration you spark continues to echo. Legacy is the echo that lingers when you disappear. The footprint that doesn't wash away just because you're not standing there anymore. It's what people feel when they realize your presence left marks too deep to fade. Even in your absence, the lessons you taught, the energy you carried, and the influence you spread remain alive in the minds of those who cross paths with you. Legacy is proof that you are more than a body in a room. You were impact, you were influence, you were memory stitched into the fabric of their everyday lives. When you disappear, people begin to notice how often your words come back to them, how often your actions set the standard for theirs, how often your way of living became an example they quietly follow. That's legacy working in silence. For some, your legacy lives in conversations. They quote things you said without even realizing it. A phrase you dropped in casual talk might replay in their head when they're making decisions. Advice you gave in a moment they brushed off suddenly becomes the voice guiding them now. Even though you're not there, your thoughts are still moving through them. That's the power of influence. You plant seeds that grow long after you've stepped away. They may not give you credit out loud, but in their private moments, they hear you. That's how your absence proves your presence never really left. Others feel your legacy in their habits. Maybe you pushed them to work harder, to think bigger, to stop doubting themselves. While you were around, they might have resisted, maybe even complained. But after you disappear, they start moving with a different rhythm. They find themselves grinding harder, thinking sharper, living with more purpose. And when they trace back where it started, they realize it was you who sparked that change. That realization makes your legacy undeniable because it shows you shaped parts of their life in ways that don't fade with distance. Legacy also shows up in how people treat others after you're gone. The way you respected people, the way you carried yourself, the way you gave game or showed love, it sticks. They might start treating others with the same patience or strength they saw in you. They might adopt the way you carried yourself as a blueprint for their own behavior. In that way, your absence doesn't mean you're forgotten. It means your character becomes a standard they measure themselves against. They look at how you moved and they want to honor that by moving with the same integrity. For some, legacy is tied to inspiration. They watch how you disappeared to protect your energy, to elevate, to create space for growth. And they carry that lesson into their own life. They might not say it, but your choice becomes part of their story. They'll tell people years later about someone they knew who had the courage to step away and how that moment changed the way they thought about themselves. That story lives longer than your presence ever could. Legacy is built on stories, on the way people keep repeating your name, your choices, your impact, even when you're nowhere around. Legacy also creates responsibility. The more powerful your influence, the harder it is for people to ignore what you left behind. They might feel pressure to live up to the standard you set, to not waste the lessons you gave them. That pressure isn't always comfortable, but it's valuable because it keeps them moving forward. Your absence becomes motivation for them to keep your name alive through action. They don't just remember you, they represent you. That's when legacy transforms into movement. And legacy isn't only about what you gave others, it's also about what they discover in themselves because of you. When you disappear, they realize you unlock parts of them they might never have found on their own. You might have shown them their strength, their potential, or their resilience. Even though you're not around, those discoveries keep growing inside them. They live with pieces of you in their daily actions, and that presence is what makes legacy eternal. So when you disappear, understand it ain't weakness, it ain't retreat, it's revelation. It shows people who you really were to them. It brings out their shock, their silence, their regret, their respect. It forces them to reflect, to feel inspired, to carry your legacy in ways they didn't even plan. Disappearing is not about vanishing forever. It's about reminding the world that your presence is not promised, that your energy is priceless, and that your time is sacred. They'll feel 10 different things when you're gone, but the one thing they can't deny is that they felt you. They felt your impact. They felt the difference between when you were here and when you weren't. That gap is proof of your value. And if you ever return, you don't return the same. You return sharper, stronger, and more undeniable than before. So don't be afraid to step back. Don't be afraid to vanish from the noise. Because in your silence, you speak the loudest. And when they feel you in your absence, that's when you know you were never just another face in the crowd. You were a force. And forces don't disappear, they transform.